What's up everybody? It's Travis here from Travis.media. Today's video goes out to all of you React nerds who always want to build your backend with Express. In this video, I'm going to share with you how to set up a .NET React project. So we're going to use the .NET CLI to create a .NET API. It's also going to include a React project, and we're going to use Entity Framework Core to do all of their scaffolding and ORM stuff, and we're going to be using Postgres as a database. So if you love React, you're looking for a new project, or if you need to do some work with it in a .NET backend, this video is for you. Now, we're not going to be building a full-fledged app. I'm just going to be taking you from the initial app that you get by running the .NET command all the way through hooking up your database and everything to where you're posting and getting and doing all the API calls. So it's all you need to take all of your React skills and build out a nice full stack app in React in .NET. And as always, if you find this video helpful, click that like button and consider subscribing. Let's get started.
All right, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you have .NET 5.0 SDK on your computer. If not, just go to .net.microsoft.com/download. Click on this download .NET SDK. Make sure you choose 5.0. That will give you the SDK plus the CLI tools. Second, let's create our project. So I'm going to go to iTerm, go to my desktop, and I'm going to create a project. I'm going to call it ReactNet. So to do that, you're going to use the .NET CLI command, .NET new react -o, I guess is like output. What folder do you want to output it all in? But I'm going to call it ReactNet. And then I'm going to choose auth. You don't have to choose auth, but a lot of times you want authentication built in. This is .NET's OIDC identity packages. So --auth, and you're going to say individual. So that's .NET new react -o, ReactNet, or whatever you want to call it, your project, --auth, individual auth. Hit return, and it should create your project. So whatever folder you're in, it's going to create a new folder called ReactNet. Once this is done, we need to cd into it, and we'll get started. cd reactnet, cd reactnet, and I'm going to do code dot to open it up in VSCode. So you'll see here, it's just like any other .NET project, API project. There's no views, but you have your controllers, data, models, pages, all that stuff, your startup file, your app settings. And then up here in the top, the big difference is you have a client app folder. And this is your create React app project. So this is going to have your index.js, your app.js, all of your components. There are going to be a few components set up, and a folder called API authorization. This is your OIDC identity that .NET adds in when you choose that auth command that we did when we set up the project. But we're not going to be able to get into all this in this video. If you want me to do that some other time, just let me know. But you should be familiar with this, your components, your app, your index, your package.json. So what we want to do now is we want to cd into that client app folder, and we want to run npm install, which is what we do with any React project. Npm install, and we'll wait for that to finish. Once that's done, we want to change directory back into our root directory, so cd ... and we need to run .NET run. That's how you run a .NET project, .NET run. This is going to create the app on our localhost :5001 URL. So I can just hold command and find, localhost 5001, and I'm going to open it here. And while that's coming up, just to take a quick look, of course, our routes, if we go to app.js, our routes are controlled via the React router. So we see here our home route renders the home component, our /counter renders the counter component. The fetch data component is behind an authorize route, which you're going to have to use the .NET identity system to access it. So when you go to it, it's going to redirect you to the login page. So any routes, any components that you build, things that you want to route will go here. And you can actually look at the components. There's a bunch of stuff they put into this base project to kind of teach you how React and .NET work together. And here we go. So up here you have the home, you have counter, you have fetch data, register, and login. So if I go to counter, I can see they just set up a basic little React reactive counter. I can go home. If I go to fetch data, it's going to redirect me to the login page, which this is actually the backend.net page, but we won't get into all that here. So the next thing we want to do, we want to set up a database for our project. I'm going to use Postgres because I like Postgres, and I'm on a Mac. They have an app called Postgres for Mac that's really awesome. But whatever you're on, Postgres is the same everywhere, so however you can access it, that's great. Do it. And so with this app, basically, here's all my databases. I do a lot of just kind of messing around here. So I'm going to create a new one. And just another side note, if I go to server settings, you'll see that my port is 5433. Make sure yours is 5432. I have a conflict, so I just bumped that up one, but I'm certain that yours is going to be 5432. So to create a new database, I go to this Postgres, this parent database, double click it, and it puts me in the command line, the Postgres command line. So I can say create database, let's call it ReactNet. Make sure you put the semicolon. Postgres is funky about that. And then create user, let's do Travis with encrypted password Travis, super safe. Created role, and then finally grant all privileges on database. What do we call it? ReactNet to Travis. So this is granting all privileges on ReactNet to my user that I just created. And that's all. That's all we got to do. If I close this out now, we should see our database. Where's it at? ReactNet, there it is. So our database is created. We can get rid of this. Postgres is good. Next, in order to talk to Postgres, we need two things. We need to download the package, the NuGet package, and then we need to create the connection string. So if I go to NuGet, I don't know what this is going to bring up. Yeah, there it is, top request. I don't know if it was somebody's name or whatever. But up here for where you search for packages, just type in Postgres. And we're going to choose the npg sql.entityframeworkcore.postgresql because we're doing everything entity framework here. And because, let me take a look at my project. If I go to the project file, I want to see what version all of my already installed packages are. So 5.05. I like to keep that consistent or as close as I can. So I'm going to see if they have a 5.05. There it is. So I'm going to click that, and then in this .NET CLI tab, I'll just copy this command, this .NET add package command, stop my app, and paste it here to install this Postgres package. Awesome. So you see it's added in my project file. Now we want to go to the appsettings.development.json and create the connection string. So I don't like the way this is formatted. Yeah, there we go. All right, so I'm going to come up here and connection strings. Now watch this. Look at that. How did that pop up? Just a side note, I finally got approved for the GitHub Copilot access. Like it's still in testing phase and you can get on the waiting list. Finally got approved, and GitHub Copilot is so cool. See how it already suggests a connection here. So I'm just going to hit tab to accept it, and we're going to work through it. So server is definitely going to be localhost. Then we're going to have port equals, mine is 5433. Yours is going to be 5432. And the database name, I think we called it ReactNet. Then we're going to have user ID equals Travis. Password equals Travis. And I'm just going to take this last part out. Make sure you put semicolons at the end of each one of these. And that's all we need. We have a connection string called default connection. So I'm going to save that file. So we've set up our connection to Postgres. We've created the database. Now let's go ahead and create a model. So I didn't I don't really have an app that we're building here. We're not building like a note taker app or anything. That would be a really long video. What I'm doing is I'm getting you all the way set up with .NET and React so that you can use your React skills to do all the amazing things you do. So I'm going to create a model, and I'm just going to call it Note, like as if we're creating a Notes app. So if you go to Models, and if you didn't choose the auth when we created this project, you're not going to have a Models folder. So if you don't, just right-click, New Folder, create one called Models. I'm going to create a new model called Note.cs. And I'm just going to copy from this application user so that I don't have to type in the namespace and everything. Get rid of these that I'm not using. And we're going to call this class Note and take off this other part. All right, so what do we want in a Note class? Look at that. GitHub Copilot's already suggesting some, look at that, ID, title, content, user ID, user. Pretty cool. I think what we want is an ID for our notes. We want a title and then maybe a description. So we have a title for the note and the description is the actual note. So I'm just going to do prop. I think this comes with like the C# extension or something, but you can type prop and it's kind of a shortcut. So public string, we don't want string, we want int. Public int ID. Then I'm going to copy this 2 more times. We want this, both of these to be string. And we want the first one as a title, the second one as a description. So we got 3 parameters here. We have the ID, which is an int. We have a title, which is a string, and a description, which is also a string. And that's it. That's going to be our note model. So we'll be able to create notes, delete notes, all of that stuff. So save that. Next, we need to set up our database context. Now, this is what Entity Framework Core uses to scaffold all this neat stuff and do all the great stuff that it does. So we need to set up a DB context in our data folder. And by the way, yeah, so delete this migrations folder because they're currently using SQLite. So we don't want these migrations. And down here where it says app.db, just delete that file. That's the database they're using. It's kind of the temporary one they set up. But if you go back up to data, you see that we already have an application DB context. This is related to the identity. So I want to create another one. I'm going to call it mydbcontext.cs. And I am going to just copy from the other one again. And change this to mydbcontext. And it's going to inherit from, I think it's D lowercase b, DB context. So we're going to call it mydbcontext, inherited from DB context. And look at that. I'm going to go ahead and cut GitHub Copilot off for now because I don't need it anymore. And in fact, I'm just going to erase this. I'm going to type this in. This is the only actual typing we're going to do here. You can Google this and get it anywhere. It's just standard, but I'm going to type it in. So public mydb context. This is just the constructor. DB context options. DB context. Options. Inherit from base. Options, and we're going to leave this open. Nothing goes there. And then finally, you use this DB set. So watch this. Public DB set of type note, which is our model, called notes. Get set. So we have this DB set called notes that's of type note. And that's all we need to do. Do need to put a semicolon after that. Okay, so we have our database set up. We have a model. And we have a DB context. Now if we go to startup.cs, you'll see if you scroll down where all this stuff gets spun up when the app starts, you'll see that we have a DB context added here called application DB context, which we know is the other one. I'm just gonna comment it out because we're not going to be messing with that. But I am going to copy it and just use it for what we're about to do. So make a copy of it and change the DB context to the one we just created. My DB context. And instead of use SQLite, we're using Postgres. So you should be able to type in use and see all the options. NPG SQL is what we're going to choose. And then configuration.getConnectionString default connection, which is what we named our connection string, default connection. So when our app gets started up, it's going to set up this DB context service and do all of the magic it does to connect to our database. So we're done with that. Now we're going to use Entity Framework Core to scaffold a few things. And it's actually what Microsoft calls reverse engineering. See if I can find that. Entity Framework Core reverse engineering. Yeah. So reverse engineering is the process of scaffolding entity type classes in a DB context class based on a database schema. So we're using all of these parts to scaffold stuff. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to scaffold a controller for our notes. So we can use our DB context in the model that we have, and Entity Framework can actually create the entire controller for us. The create, the read, the update, and the delete. It's pretty cool. And to do that, we need a few packages. So we're going to have to add a few packages here. First, we need to install the Entity Framework CLI. So to do that, just type .NET tool install global .NET EF. So you want to run .NET tool install -- global .NET -EF. And if you run that, it's going to tell me I already have it. Cool. Once that's done, we need to install something called .NET ASP.NET Code Generator. This is what's going to build things for us. So .NET tool install global .NET ASP.NET Code Generator. So once you have that, hit enter and install that, which I already have it. And to be sure that that CLI is working, just type in .NET EF. Good. You should get an output like that. Entity Framework with this crazy looking unicorn. If you got that, you're good. Next, we need to add 3 more packages. This is going to help us do all our scaffolding. So just follow along with me. So .NET add package Microsoft Entity Framework Core .design version 5.0.5 to keep with their standard. So this is called Microsoft Entity Framework Core .design. So add that package. Next, you'll want to add, and by the way, if you didn't know to add these things, it would totally tell you. When you try to run the scaffold we're about to do, it'll say, hey, make sure you install the design package, these kind of things. That's how I knew it. But a .NET add package, Microsoft.visualstudio.web.codegeneration.design. And I'm assuming if you use Visual Studio instead of VS Code, you can do all the scaffolding like in a nice GUI way. So you can check boxes and say, I want to pull in this, I want to add this. But I don't like Visual Studio. It's really bloated, and I like to use VS Code. And I like the .NET CLI. So that's probably what this package is all about. This is allowing us to do all this scaffolding from VS Code. But yeah, it's Microsoft.visualstudio.web.codegeneration.design. The version is 5.0.1. If you go to NuGet and type this in, there is no 5.05. So make sure you do 5.01 and hit enter to install that. That's our second package. Our third package is .NET add package Microsoft.Entity Framework core, and instead of .design, we're going to do SQL Server and then version 5.0.5. So hit return, and that's our final package. Now, when you install that ASP.NET code generator, you also got a command that you can run. This is how we scaffold stuff. So if I type in .NET ASP.NET code generator, of course with a dash between those, it should run something. Well, on my computer it says command not found. So yours may have worked, yours may not have worked. Mine doesn't work. For some reason it doesn't put that in the path when you install it, so we have to type out the full path. Of course we can put it in the path, but since we're only using this like once in a blue moon, I'm just going to put in the full path. If you have a Windows computer, you're going to want to put, it's going to be in this location, user, so whatever your user profile is, .NET /tools. It'll be somewhere like that. If you go to your user profile, there'll be a .NET folder and then a tools in it. So you'll want to prefix your command with that. If you're on a Mac like I am, you just do home, and then it's going to be in the .NET folder, and then tools. And then you want to run the command. So .NET ASP.NET code generator. And by the way, you can type in like .NET ASP.NET code generator. You can type this in and you can go straight to that command. And there's a ton of things you can do with it. It's really informative. But if what I'm typing right now is like, where is he getting all this stuff from? I'm just getting it from here. I'm basically just copy and pasting. I'm doing a lot of work for you. So let's go back. And what we're going to do is we're going to scaffold a controller. So we're going to take this note model. We're going to create a controller for it. And this is going to do all the work for us. So we're going to type in this command with the prefix on it. And then we want a controller. The name of the controller is going to be notes controller. Remember, the controller is plural and the model is singular. So notes controller. We want these to be async calls. It's going to be an API, which means there's not going to be any views. It's not going to be rendering any views. It's going to be returning JSON. And then we do an M flag, which is what model are we referencing, and that's note. And then DC, I'm assuming this is like database context. That's my DB context, remember? We added that DB set in there. And then finally, relative folder path is controllers. That's going to put this in the controllers folder. So make sure you have all that. Hit enter and watch this magic. And that magic just left me with some errors. All right, so I found the issue right here in the MyDB context. We passed in DB context, which is wrong. We're supposed to pass in MyDB context. Not what we're inheriting from, but the actual context that we're using. So make sure you make that change. Go back to MyDB context and make sure it's of type MyDB context, not DB context. All right, so change that and let's run this again. Sorry about that. That was my error. Run this again and it should work fine. All right, so added controller, notes controller. So if we come back up here to controllers, we see we now have a notes controller based on our note model. So here we have a get route. This gets all the notes. So API/notes is our get notes route. This gets individual notes, which is like /notes/ whatever node ID, which is 5. We have a put to update our notes. We have a post to create notes, and we have a delete to delete notes. Awesome. That did all the work for us. Now, finally, we need to take this model and relay it to our database. So we need to create a migration. And to do that, we type .NET EF migrations add, and what do we want to call it? Let's call it initial create. And we have to specify the context. See, in the data folder, we have two contexts. We need to specify which one we're focusing on. And so we put -- context, my DB context. So .NET EF migrations add initial create, which is, we can name that whatever, -- context, my DB context. Hit return, and it should create a migrations folder with some migration files in it. This takes our context and our model and what columns we want in the database and creates the code for that, so we can push that code to our database and have it create all of that stuff for us. So we have a migrations folder now. We see we have an initial create file. And if you look at this, it goes create table called notes. And the columns are going to be ID, title, and description. And they have this kind of information. So it's going to be an integer, nullable, false, all this other stuff. And then if you want to undo this, if you want to undo your migration, it has a drop table call, which is the down call and the up call. So pretty cool. So we have our migration, but that hasn't migrated yet. That just created the code for the migration. And to do that, we need to type .NET EF database update, and then of course, let them know what context, my DB context. And that's going to take this latest migration, and it's going to create all of these columns. It's going to create the table, create the columns, everything for us. Every time we do something, add something to our database, we need to create a migration, and we need to update the database. And then if we ever decide, hey, that messed up something, we can roll it back. It's really neat. But if I click this, it's going to update our database. It's going to create the columns for this note model. And essentially, Entity Framework Core works as like an ORM. It just maps our data to the database. So build started, build succeeded. Done. Okay, we should be 100% ready to go now. So if I open up Postman, bring it in here, create a new tab here. So let's run our app. Is our app running? Oh man, hope this still works. .NET run. It should. And we're going to go ahead and type 5001/API/ what was it? Notes controller. Let's create a couple of notes first. So let's go down to post. Put post. So post is API/notes. API/notes. And we should be able to go to body, raw, change this to JSON. Oops. We should be able to do, not ID, we don't need that. Title, my first note, and description, my first description. We need to change this to post, and we don't have any authorized routes, and of course our app is running. So we should be able to post this and create this new note. And by the way, if you look at the routes, it returns a created at action, which is get note, and it's going to return the note you just created. That's what we should get back. So if you hit send, boom. So it created a note, ID of 1, title description. Now if we want to create another one, let's change this to second. My second description, hit send, and now we have ID 2. So we just created 2 notes. We can go to get and see if we get those 2 notes back. This gets all notes. So hit send, we get 2 notes back. Let's just get note 1. Awesome. So our API is working, and you have a fully functional React.NET app. Now, if you go to your project, you go to the client app folder, source, go to your components, create some new components, build out your app, do some API calls to your new routes, create notes, delete notes, whatever you want to do, and build out your app with your wonderful, wonderful React skills. Now, I'm not going to be building an app at this point. That would make for a super long video. I just wanted to get you up and running with the database, entity framework, showing you how to do migrations. and ultimately how to work with React with a .NET background. Now, if you want to know anything else, like the identity or how to do other things with these with React and .NET, let me know. I can do a future video. But for now, I think that's sufficient. Like I said, take your React skills and build something beautiful.